Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the co-owner of the club, has apologised to those who were offended by his comments to Sky News that the UK has been colonised by immigrants. The Monaco-based emigrant received ire from all quarters for a largely fact-free hyperbolic broadside against, in the first instance, most relevantly to him, the people who are making the club he co-owns more successful on the pitch and therefore off the pitch. He is literally benefiting financially from the work of so-called colonisers. I don't think my country is being colonised by migrants, as if it were a kind of deliberate attempt by the foreign to turn us all into something that we are not. Far from it. So Ratcliffe is completely wrong. What I do think, because it's true, is that the pace of demographic change in the last 5 years has been at a scale and speed we have literally never seen before, and there are obvious changes, not all of them positive perhaps, as a result. But why you would seek to blame the migrants who have arrived here under rules that allowed and encouraged them to come here, I don't know. Bruno Fernandes did not sneak his way into the United team to colonise it. He was asked, practically begged, to play for them. Ratcliffe is going to, I suggest, be really upset when he finds out who has been paying for all that colonising of his football club. If Sir Jim is upset about the speed and pace of demographic change, maybe he should be asking why the people in charge of setting the rules of who could come liberalised them so much. Don't play the man, Sir Jim. Play the ball. Do you accept his apology? I want to play you this clip before I come to my guests of the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, who has backed the Man United co-owner.
Sir Jim Ratcliffe, one of the richest Britons in the world, of course the boss of Ineos and now a major shareholder in Manchester United Football Club, has caused outrage by his comments. So what's he actually said? Well, he said that our population has gone up from 58 million to 70 million, and that with 9 million people of working age on benefits, we don't need mass migration. He said much of the country had been colonised by immigrants. Now, that word was a controversial word, and he said, OK, if you don't like the word, we'll tone it down. But just think about this. You ask yourself why public services have diminished. You ask yourself why rents have gone through the roof. The population explosion has done that. And then you look at parts of London, for example, where the road names, the underground signs, aren't just in English, they're in a foreign language as well. 1 million people living in this country don't speak any English at all. 4 million people living in this country barely speak passable English. And that's the point that he was making, that big areas of our towns and cities have been changed into something completely different to what they were, and that it's all making us poorer. And I don't really care if Number 10 is in uproar, or if much of mainstream media find his comments too difficult. I believe firmly that Jim Ratcliffe is right.
Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK. In what sense does he believe Sir Jim Ratcliffe to be right if the central point of Jim Ratcliffe's about the country being colonised, Nigel Farage says, was a controversial word to choose? It's not controversial. It's wrong, it's abject, it's grim. It creates, as an opponent to this country, the people who have been asked to come, encouraged to come, who work here, as somehow tearing it apart or destroying it. Completely fact-free. If he wants to make a point about the speed and change of demographics in this country, feel free and use facts. Otherwise, play the ball, not the man. Paul Morland is a demographer and author. Thank you for coming on the programme, Paul. I wonder what you make of Nigel Farage's stout defence of Sir Jim.
Well, I think you really have to distinguish two things. The first is the data, which Sir Jim did get wrong. I mean, he slightly confused different dates. That doesn't really matter. In terms of the data, what's very clear is there has been a precipitous fall in the share of the population which is white British, particularly in our large cities. So in London, it might have been 85% in the 1990s. It's now probably a minority. 20% fewer than 20% of inner city school kids in London are white British. So there's just the facts about very rapid ethnic change. Then there's the question of how you interpret those facts. And it seems to me that if you think it's a good thing, you can use the colonisation word. So we know there was a poem on London Underground talking about colonisation by a Jamaican writer. We know someone like Ash Sarkar of Novara Media celebrates the demographic demise of the white British. So if you celebrate it, that's absolutely fine. You won't be criticised. But if you think it's not a good thing, then you will be criticised. Now, is the term colonisation helpful? I don't find it particularly helpful, but I do think when you have a situation such as we had in the West Midlands, where the supporters of an Israeli team were banned, now you could say they should come, they shouldn't come. That should be a matter of law, that should be a matter of Parliament. It should not be a matter of a police authority effectively feeling intimidated by mob rule in that region by an immigrant group, or indeed by a white British group.
Well, we don't know that it was.
See why that
sorry, Paul. We don't know that it was. Sorry to just interrupt you. We don't know that it was an immigrant group that were threatening Israeli football fans.
It was a largely Muslim area where we can assume that they did not want the Israeli fans.
We can assume that, but we can't assume that there's an immigrant area.
Well, they are immigrants or the children of immigrants. They're not white British.
Yes, but they're... Well, hang on. If they're the children of immigrants, they may well be British.
Well, yes, but I'm the child of an immigrant, and I have two immigrants, and I do not consider myself white British. That is a census definition. That is the guidance the government gives when you fill in the census. So these are simple facts.
Yes, but, I mean, there are conditions that describe your Britishness that are beyond your attitude or your faith or whatever. They're just a fact of where you were born, to who and to whom you were born.
Yeah, there are also facts about ethnicity and origin, which are reflected in the data, and we're asked to fill in the census accordingly. I mean, we can't even monitor discrimination, for example, if people don't fill that in. So, the term white British is the term that the government uses. It asks us to decide whether we are or not white British when we fill in the census, and data tracks that. So, as I say, that's just factual.
So what would you describe yourself then as, Paul?
I would describe myself as non-white. I would describe myself as white. I would describe myself as white, but not ethnically English or British.
Because your parents...
Because I have two German-born parents.
Right.
So I have no ancestor ever born in this country. I have complete alignment to this country, as many people of ethnic origin have. I have total British citizenship and equal rights, but that doesn't make me ethnically English, Scottish, Welsh or Irish.
Yes, although I guess the idea of Britishness being an ethnicity is challenged by the racial makeup of Britain, is it not?
No, because I think if you've got British citizenship, you're British, you're civically British, you have all the rights and duties of a British citizen. But then the government has decided in its wisdom to do censuses based on your ethnicity. And ethnicity is something that first of all, we can find out scientifically if we wish to. We wish to do a genetic test. We know it through the stories our parents and our grandparents tell us. And the British government asks us to describe ourselves accurately. It has a set of categories in the census. And, that's just the way it's chosen. Now, in France, they have a slightly different attitude. They don't wish to recognise ethnic groups officially through the state. You have the state and citizenship. And
so what state?
In Britain, we haven't chosen that.
But at what stage of ancestry? What stage of ancestry do you think one needs in order to be considered ethnically British?
Well, my wife is entirely of Jewish origin. Some of her ancestors have been in this country since the 17th century.
Right.
But she doesn't have any English, Welsh or Scottish ethnicity. And she also filled in the census as I did.
Right. So in answer to the question, who is ethnically English or British, it's what?
It's people who are of English ancestry, are going back...
But how long for? I mean, would your children be ethnically English?
This is really rather a distraction to the colonisation test, but it's just something that, if you wish to, you can do a scientific test on. I mean, that your genes will tell you that.
All right. Paul Morland.
Doesn't mean you can't identify with England, but when the government asks you to say what your ethnicity is, I think you should describe it accurately. But I mean, that's got nothing to do with colonisation, really.
Right. Paul Morland is a demographer and author. Thank you very much indeed for coming on. Amos Schonfield is CEO of Our Second Home, a youth refugee charity. Do you accept the apology of Jim Ratcliffe?
I'm glad that he made an apology of sorts, Tom. I don't think it's a real apology. Saying, I'm sorry if you were offended doesn't really cut when the language that he was using about colonization is something that's so dark, something that we really wouldn't be hearing from some of the most prominent people in this country until very recently. This is the stuff that lived on the margins until, we've seen how our politics and our media has become so caustic and embracing of this kind of divisive rhetoric that will make doctors, they'll make nurses, they'll make our teachers, the people who feed us, the people who look after us, feel alien in this country. And that alien tendency, that feeling of alienating people, is something that has been part of this country forever. In 1905, the first time there was an Immigration Enforcement Act, it was the Aliens Act, and it was targeting immigrants like my ancestors, British Jews. Now, just like Paul, I wouldn't call myself necessarily white British, but that's my own personal choice. And we're now getting into this thing where we're decrying how people don't identify as white British, but also trying to narrow it as much as possible. And in fact, we know that there's this broad church of people in this country who identify really.
Can I just? Sorry to interrupt you, Amos. Were you born in here? Were you born in this country?
Yeah.
Forgive me if I've got this wrong. I can see you.
Yeah.
You're white. I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are white-skinned, Caucasian, and you were born here in Britain, why would you not say that you are white and British?
This is genuinely my personal preference for a similar reason to what Paul said. But that's why when he started his argument and we talked about how not enough people are calling themselves white British, when it's really a personal choice.
But hang on,
that's why we get incredibly messy here.
But the choice is to ignore where you were born, where you live, and your own skin colour.
Right, and so
what would you identify? What would you say that you were? You're not going to say that you're black Bengali.
Pardon, sorry.
You're not going to say that you're black Sri Lankan, are you?
No, I'm white other. I'm white Ashkenazi Jewish, and that's fine. That's how I see myself, which is useful for the census. It's not useful for understanding the future of this country and trying to create policy, which is how Nigel Farage was interpreting what Jim Ratcliffe did.
But I guess again, so you are an Ashkenazi Jewish person. But that's not a nationality. So I think the census is asking my nationality. My nationality is British. I was born here. I'm white, so I'm white British. I can be lots of other things, including that.
Yeah, and I think that what's interesting is that when Jim Ratcliffe talks about being colonised by immigrants, he doesn't really mean me. He could pass me in the streets, and he'll think of me as exactly as British as he is. And so this idea of what colonisation is and whether there's too many immigrants and the demographic change is too rapid doesn't really speak to the facts. We're trying to marry up too many different things. A lot of that is actually Jim Ratcliffe's own prejudices, because the language that is slipping out is language that we wouldn't be hearing publicly until recently, is language that he feels comfortable stating now because of divisive, caustic politicians like Nigel Farage enabling him to do that.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Amos Schonfield is CEO of Our Second Home, a youth refugee charity. This is... I'm going to be very late for the news, but this is why this notion of being ethnically British, ethnically English, Scottish, Welsh, or Northern Irish, I find really confusing. If I'm completely candid with you, I find it very confusing. For the purposes of, say, the census, forget whether it's a cricket test as it would be had many years ago. The notion of your identifying with the kind of whispers of what it means to be English or what you think it means to be Scottish, on a purely legal basis, you got white skin and you're born here, you're white British.